Okay, other members, Trevor Clarke has given notice of an urgent oral question to the Minister of Justice. I remind members that if they wish to ask supplementary questions, they should rise, continue in their place. Clarke, please read the question.
To ask the Minister of Justice, following the recent High Court ruling that the Police Ombudsman for Northern Ireland exceeded her legal powers in making findings of collusive behaviour by RUC officers in a series of loyalist paramilitary murders, what steps she will take to uphold public confidence in that office.
Minister.
I am aware of the High Court judgment and will consider it and any implications it might have in due course. However, I do have to remind the Assembly that the Police Ombudsman operates independently of the Minister of Justice and of the Department. The Ombudsman's Office carries out a vital role in investigating complaints in regard to the conduct of police officers. I note that the judgment acknowledged each of the reports was the product of detailed investigation and significant hard work by the Ombudsman and her team of officers. The judgment also clearly states that it isn't intended to undermine or cast doubt on the professionalism of the staff in relation to their investigatory work.
What
the Minister says, but given, Minister, this is not the first time that the courts have found against the Ombudsman in terms of sweeping statements. Will you continue to give the Ombudsman cover, or will you come out against the Ombudsman rather than hiding behind what you've just said today?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's no intent on my part to hide behind anything or anyone, nor would the Ombudsman seek to hide behind me. The Ombudsman is an appointee of the Executive Office. She is a corporation sole, and that is a different structure to pretty much any other public appointment that we deal with. As I have already noted, I will want to take time to consider what is a lengthy and complex judgment and give the issues that it has raised some thought, and the member is of course right that it comes on the back of a previous judgment of a previous Ombudsman in relation to language used in their reports and to which the current Ombudsman had then responded. The Ombudsman, however, is independent of the Minister of Justice. Those are the facts, however uncomfortable it may be for Assembly members.
Kelly.
Biggest lesson and Fraggle G. Shaw, Minister. Thank you for your answer up till now. Would the Minister agree with me, and I understand you may not have read the full judgment, but what we know of it, that the judgment actually did not say that collusion by state forces did not take place?
Sure.
The issue, as I understand it, and I have had the opportunity to very briefly read through the judgment, though I have to say I would want to do so a few more times before I comment on its detail. It was clear that it was not striking down the entire report, but that it was saying that in terms of making determinations, it had exceeded the power of the Ombudsman's Office. The Ombudsman will now require time to consider and reflect on that finding by the courts, as will the Department of Justice, in order that we're able to reach the right conclusions. However, to be clear, the judgment has not struck down the statements in question, and how the Ombudsman chooses to respond to the court judgment is a matter for her and her alone to consider.
Connie Egan.
Minister, could you clarify whether this judgment can be appealed?
With any court judgment, that is always an option that is available to the person about whom the judgment has been made. It would not be appropriate for me to seek to influence the Ombudsman or her office in that regard. However, she does, of course, reserve the right, if she wishes to do so, to appeal the judgment. However, I have no reason to believe either way her decision has been taken at this stage, and I would imagine time to reflect on the totality of the judgment.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. For the record, and in contrast to some of the chuntering we're hearing in the chamber today, it's worth putting on the record. The people to bear in mind are the innocent men who were gunned down at the Heights Bar in Loughlin Island, Sean Graham's bookmakers, and other locations. There is clear evidence of collusion in the security forces. That's not to smear everybody who served in the police and the security forces, but there is clear evidence. Will the Minister agree with me that the way to deal with these issues is for the British Government and others to agree and deliver a proper Article 2 compliant process which achieves justice and decency for the families of those innocent people?
Minister.
Well, on reflecting on all of these issues, I am conscious that the most controversial interventions that the Ombudsman's Office makes tend to be with issues that are about historical legacy cases. And that was not the purpose of the Ombudsman's Office when it was designed, but it became the purpose of the Ombudsman in lieu of anything else that would actually give people the answers they were seeking. I have said many times on the record that I would much prefer that the legacy structures were a separate structure, that they were fully comprehensive and looked at all of these cases properly and with due process, rather than infecting the policing and the oversight structures of today with problems of legacy in the past, and that remains my position.
John Buckley.
Speaker, the court has ruled that the Police Ombudsman reached conclusions outside her legal scope of office, and in effect, Marie Anderson has acted illegally and clearly from a politically motivated way. I believe she has compromised her office. I believe also that she has brought dishonour on that office in more ways than one. So can I ask the Justice Minister, does she agree? And if so, what process can be put in place to remove Marie Anderson from office, because it's clear it is no longer tenable?
Minister.
Well, the first thing is I don't agree with the member, because the judgment doesn't say that it was by political motivation. It does reflect the reality, however, that the determinations reached exceeded the scope of the Ombudsman's powers in the view of the courts, and therefore that is something that we will have to reflect on. As I have already said, the Ombudsman is a corporation sole. She is appointed by the Executive Office acting jointly, and to the best of my knowledge, the Department of Justice has no powers to remove or dislodge the Ombudsman from office once appointed by TEO.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. Minister, the Ombudsman is there to hold the police to account, and that's fair enough, but we've now got to a stage where the police has lost trust in the Ombudsman. And indeed, what I'm hearing from, and you graciously were out and condemned the 9 injured police officers of Londonderry, but what I'm hearing is police officers are failing to defend themselves because of fear of what happens through the Ombudsman's office. Could I ask the Minister, does she think it's time to have an independent review of the office of the Police Ombudsman?
Sir.
Well, with respect, I think the question that the member poses is one that is, whilst it's a valid question, it is way outside the scope of this particular issue. This is about the varies of the Ombudsman's office and their legal responsibilities. It's not about wider concerns about the operation of the office in modern day cases. And I think it's important that we keep focus on the narrow point of this question, which Trevor Clarke has raised, rather than going on a further fishing expedition to undermine anybody's office.
Philip Rudd.
Minister, you may not agree, but there clearly is a public concern on this issue in relation to the Police Ombudsman, be it the failure of her office to release the Keynes Mill report, a 17-month police investigation by the West Midlands Police, or now a Diamond Court judgment. Do you, as Minister of Justice, simple yes or no question, have confidence in the Police Ombudsman?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we always know we're being lined up for one of those gotchas when somebody says that it's a simple yes or no answer. But of course, it isn't. Because first of all, it would be entirely inappropriate for me to make any comment on an ongoing police investigation, and so I will not be drawn to do so either in a single word or in multiple words. It would also be inappropriate for me to reach conclusions about this most recent case before the courts until we have had the time to reflect on the implications of that for the Ombudsman's office and for her responsibilities. And so we will reflect on all of these issues, and we'll do so in due course.
Paula Bradshaw.
Sorry, I wasn't. Did I ask?
Timothy Gaston.
Thank you much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, does the Justice Minister believe the Ombudsman should apologise to the officers she unlawfully defamed, and will she ensure all reports are speedily amended?
Minister.
Well, the issue of whether someone owes somebody else an apology is one I'm not going to dip into. I think the issue here is about the court judgment. The robustness of that judgment and the response of the Ombudsman to it will be known in due course when she, like I, have had adequate time to reflect on that judgment, and she will reach her own conclusions as to what is required in terms of response to it.
Ann Dodds.
Mr. Speaker, We've heard a lot of deflection from the Minister for Justice today, and a lot of it's not my responsibility. But there is a responsibility in all of us in this House, and that is to uphold the rule of law. And it is also to support those officers who uphold the rule of law. So does the Minister accept that this judgment in relation to the Police Ombudsman's office has actually undermined the rule of law and undermined the faith of ordinary policemen who were out in Londonderry at the weekend being attacked by thugs in the role that they do?
Minister.
Well, first of all, I have been entirely clear and without any caveats when it comes to condemning the behaviour over the recent weekend in terms of attacks on police officers. When people put themselves in the line of danger in order to protect the rest of the community, they deserve our cooperation and our respect as they do so, and they should not face attack. I would remind the member who asks the question that it is not just our job as members of this Assembly to uphold respect for individual police officers who do so, but for the structures of oversight around policing. That includes the Ombudsman, the Board and the police service itself. If we want there to be trust and confidence in policing in Northern Ireland, we have a duty to ensure that the public have confidence in all three.
Justin McNulty.
I thank the Minister for her answers thus far. Minister, who, in your opinion, is the independent authority or arbitrator in determining the extent of collusive behaviour between both security forces and loyalist death squads and punishment squads, and security forces and IRA death squads and punishment squads?
Well, it's very clear that the court at this stage has indicated that they do not believe the appropriate authority is the Ombudsman's office. It is also clear that there are alternative structures currently being created to do investigation and, to a degree, adjudication in matters that relate to legacy issues, the ICRIR being one significant part of that. Whether they will have the lawful authority to do so or not remains to be seen, because their judgments may also be subject to judicial review in due course. The key here is that if an individual is accused of a crime or is accused of committing a crime, they have a right to a fair trial, and that remains the case whether they are a member of the police service, whether they are an ordinary member of the public, or whatever role they may hold. And if that is interfered with in any way, by any action, then of course the courts will be concerned about that, because ultimately it is for the courts to decide if an individual is guilty. Whether that means that people can rule in general terms is a matter that is beyond me, and one that will probably end up being determined by those courts.
Brian Kingston.
We should record our debt to the Retired Police Officers Association for taking this court challenge to the Office of the Police Ombudsman and revealing that she has exceeded her powers in repeatedly finding this vague term of collusive behaviour, when in fact she found no evidence of actual collusion. Can the Justice Minister confirm, regarding this term collusive behaviour, whatever that means, no such offence is actually defined in law? Not a single prosecution or misconduct file has been forwarded taking that term, and no evidence of improper motive on the part of police officers.
Minister.
Well, I draw the member again to what the judgment did and didn't do. It did not strike down the wider parts of the report. It acknowledged that each of the reports was the product of detailed investigation and significant hard work by the Ombudsman and her team of officers, and clearly stated that it isn't intended to undermine or cast doubt on the professionalism of the staff in relation to their investigatory work. The member will know that the genesis of the term collusive behaviours was in response to a previous court judgment where the allegation of collusion, which is a criminal offence, was made, and was not in the end accepted that the court would allow the Ombudsman to reach that conclusion without a full trial. In this case, they have simply said that the Ombudsman does not have the power to adjudicate on that. What they haven't done is strike down the rest of the report, and I would caution members about exceeding the varies of the judgment itself in their commentary around it.
Thank you. That concludes questions to the Minister of Justice on this item. We now move back to the Tobacco and Vapes Bill, and I call Claire